Welcome back, everyone, and in today's video is going to be a fun one. This one is a very basic terrain editor. I wanted to make something that someone can kind of use and run with and build something, and maybe I can do something in the future. And I kind of had a eureka moment on how to do this when I was at a park the other day, recently. So I managed to put it together, and it's kind of like an itch to scratch. And I have a pretty decent working 3D mesh. So if I hold down let's see, Control Shift, I can actually highlight where in the terrain my mouse is, and I can just click and just start building terrains exactly where I expect it. And I can also use the middle mouse click, and I can go downward as well. So there you go. There's a terrain. And not only can I just draw on a 3D space as well, I can actually draw on the 2D. This is the actual height map that I'm drawing. This is the actual texture, and it's a 2D canvas that I can convert into a texture and then pass it over to the GPU. So I can click on technically on the 2D type map, or I can do it on the 3D model, and they both update the exact same height map, and then that height map then gets pushed over to the GPU, and it deforms the texture grid. Now, the secret sauce behind this is, how do you know where you're clicking? What I'm using is things we've done in the past. We've done custom frame buffers, and I've done picking. And what we've done picking before is that we click on the screen, grab the pixel, and that pixel has information stored in a way like the ID of the object. In this case, instead of storing like an ID value, I'm storing the UV values themselves for that specific pixel. So I have a custom buffer, and I'm using a color texture to store the UV values of the terrain. And if I just render the UV texture instead of the color texture, now you get to see the terrain. So by simply clicking anywhere in this 3D space, I can then take that UV value and then apply it over here. And that's really the secret sauce of how to actually do it. And the funny thing is, after I was done building this, I realized I can actually turn around and use this as a texture painting tool as well. So I might do that in the future. I'm going to try to make my own 3D model, and you know, try to do this really quickly. Someone just contacted me. So I had lost track of where I was talking about. So that's the secret sauce to this. It's just saving the UV and using picking. And I also have a RGB. So R and G stores the UV values, and then B I store just a number, because of the background is all zeros. I think it's actually the alpha state. The alpha channel, I store like a value of 1 or something. So if I click on here, I check the alpha state and it says 0, I know I'm in this blank area. If I click here and the alpha state is like not 0, then I know I'm clicking on a UV. I'm actually clicking on something on the screen that I want to modify. So what else? So that's that. And the terrain I'm using is this terrain. I'm trying out a different type of terrain, an isometric grid, as opposed to our regular triangle strips. I just was reading an article, and the person suggested using this terrain to do create terrains, because like this grid fashion works better for distorting it. So since a height map does a lot of distortions, I just tried to give it a try. If you're really interested in the code, it's in my terrain fungi.mod terrain folder, and it's terrain.isogrid. This is really the secret file section. All this, everything up here creates the UV values and the vertices. and everything down here creates the triangles, the index for it. So it's a little tricky. It's just a lot of playing with numbers, and you can create it, like I said. So what else? And like I said before, we could take the canvas and we can load it up as a texture, and we can just pass it up as part of our material. And I can also update the world position of the mouse. So we can kind of highlight where the mouse is, so we can have more control of where we're drawing, so we're not drawing blindly. We got like a lot of simple stuff. The main thing is this function, get mouse over UV. So it reads the pixel, and the pixel value is between 0 and 25. So I need to convert that into UV values. So here we go. So I take 1 over 25, I do the invert, so this way I can do multiplication instead of division. So it's really just pixel value over 225, which creates you a value between 0 and 1, which is the UV value that we're actually looking for. So that's the simple conversion from color data into the data that we actually want, because that's what that buffer stores, color information. The drawings, like I said, it's pretty simple. You pass in the position on the canvas, and the position on the canvas is based on the UV value. So like right here, when you click on mouse move, mouse down. So yeah, you get the UV value. You take the width, and you multiply it by the UV value. For the height, I need to flip it, because the coordinate system on the canvas is the top right, and the UV coordinate system is bottom right. So I just need to do that flipping on the Y position, and everything kind of just falls into place. And every time I click, I update I just draw onto the canvas, and I update the texture. I just copy the texture back to the GPU, and if I go back and just uncomment it, and that's it. And like I said, based on height maps, gray is 0, white is the maximum height, and black is the lowest part. And that's, like I said, I'm drawing white, that makes the height, and I draw black, that goes down. And if it's black and then I draw black onto white, kind of try to even it out. But like I said, this is a basic terrain editor, so you need to kind of add more features and more numbers and more sensitivity to it. The last thing I can do is talk about the shader, and the shaders is pretty simple. We pass in our world position. We pass in we pass out the world position for the pixel, so we can kind of use it for the mouse. So the vertex shader is pretty simple. Like I said, we want to deform the mesh based on the height. So we get the UV value for the texture. I don't know why we need a texture scale, but what's texture scale? It's probably 1, in case I want to do some other things. But overall, you have the UV value, and then this is the maximum height, either positive or negative, based on the value you pass in. And you pass in the UV, you pass in the position, and the texture. And like I say, it grabs the texture, grabs the R value, because that's all. The height map is just the first value. I translate it to, because it's a value between 0 and 1. We need to convert it into a value between -1 and 1, multiply it by the height, and we just change the Y position of our vertice, and that becomes our new height. And yeah, we pass over, so that deforms the mesh very easily. So by using the height map, it's very simple. The very simple deformation. And then to get the highlight, we have the world position, and we pass in our, let's see, is it this one? Our world mouse position. and that we calculate using the UV value. And we just check the length between the two. If they're a radius less than 2, we change the color to the green to 1. And then our regular lighting, or like very simple coloring, whatever, it just adds a hint of green to it based on the radius of 0.2. So I can change the radius to a higher radius value. Ideally, you should calculate the radius based on how big and how small your brush is. But like I said, this is very basic. I don't have anything like that. So this is something if you want to add different size brushes and different types of brushes, you're going to have to add in more complicated functionality to kind of get that in there. But like I said, this is a good starting point. And that, like I said, this part is what handles the deformation, and this is really what gives you the green highlight for the mouse. And that's it. And that's a very simple a terrain editor that you can use to draw. Like I said, you can draw in 2D and in 3D, and they update the exact same texture. And I hope to see people actually use this basic example and make something really cool out of it. It'd be kind of great. And like I said, down the line, I'm probably going to make a UV painter, because this functionality can also be used as a UV painter as well, to actually actually create textures for 3D models. If you have like an actual drawing functionality like brushes and colors and whatnot. So that's it for today's video. Hope you like and subscribe, and I see you guys at the next one.